The sitting is resumed. Who's next, please? Senator Maladu.
Mr. President, thank you for recognizing me. Good afternoon. I'll be brief as usual. This bill before us today, sir, as you would appreciate, is not one that is really within my wheelhouse directly, but the implications of crime in Barbados is definitely within all of our wheelhouses. And crime impacts individuals, it impacts families, it impacts businesses, it impacts all of Barbados. It impacts our reputation globally. It impacts investors coming into the island. Crime is a problem. And as such, anything at all, Mr. President, that can be done that has as its aim and has a high likelihood of reducing the amount of crime we see in Barbados will have my support. As such, my understanding of this bill has very much that as its goal. I want to compliment Senator Boyce on his presentation, which he really did help me to understand some of the complications of the previous piece of legislation and why this new version was necessary. But at the end of the day, the Bail Act addresses what happens after a crime has been committed, when we have an accused, not when we have a guilty person. There will be someone guilty when a crime occurs, but we don't know who it is. We have an accused person, and this Bail Act addresses those who are accused. I also do agree that fundamentally in our Constitution, we must have certain freedoms, and the freedom of liberty while being accused, I believe, is fundamental. And as much as any other person in this room, and probably anyone within hearing my voice, will want to throw the accused for a capital crime into jail and wait until we can't do that, because we are a civil society and we recognize that you are presumed innocent. So I understand the need for certain circumstances where bail is relevant. And I thought that in Section 6 of the Bail Act, me as a layman understood and it read very clearly to me what those circumstances would be. Perhaps a more conservative person would want bail to be a privilege that is offered in certain circumstances, as opposed to a right which you can only be taken away from you under certain circumstances. But that's not the world that we live in, and there are many different things I could point to with that. Well, sir, I would just like to turn to perhaps some comments I heard in the other place by the Prime Minister, and I've heard some today as well, talking about guns and gun crime. Frankly speaking, sir, I don't come from a gun culture. I'm well aware of friends I have, people I know, who I describe as a gun culture. They carry guns, and it seems to be a part of the Barbadian community who have this right to carry guns, or believe that they should carry a gun. If I had my way, sir, there would be no guns at all. Our soldiers would need it to protect ourselves from foreign enemies, but there would be no need for the average person to carry a gun. But that ship has long sailed, unfortunately, or so I'm told. How you turn back the hands of time and get rid of the guns, I don't know. But in the absence of not being able to do that, and the truth is that I do believe that there are some people who have legitimate reasons for wanting to have a gun. And I have no objection to that. But perhaps, sir, it would not be unreasonable to see significant restrictions coming on the caliber of guns that can come into this island, the type of guns, and the type of ammunition that comes in. And I frankly would like to see government, and I would encourage government to come forward with further enhancements to the restriction on ammunition. There is absolutely no good reason, in my opinion, for persons to be having an abundance of ammunition. Now, what is an abundance? Is it more than one bullet? Is it more than two? Is it more than three? There is some number that someone can look at. But there has to be a threshold at some point where it says that can't be for legitimate purposes, and we need to throw the book at them. And as I said, I would also like to see some very clear restrictions on the type of ammunition, because I am told that there are high-powered bullets that can travel for a mile, and there are all kinds of high-powered rifles and so on. So when we address crime, as I said at the beginning, Mr. President, the Bail Act deals after the fact. The crime has already happened. I really would like us to do a lot more focusing on the prevention of the crime before we even get to that point. And I do hope that we can find a way to restrict ammunition. And I would even go as far as to suggest that perhaps there is an abundance of ammunition out there today which is perhaps legal, but is unnecessary. And I would like to suggest perhaps there could be an amnesty for ammunition to be turned in. And I know we've done these amnesties before on guns and so on. And the truth is, those who have legal guns might follow and turn in a gun. But those who have a gun for committing a crime, they're not turning in the gun, sir. We know that they're not. But let us try to get more and more of these guns out of circulation. So I hope that we will see some more robust legislation coming forward that will address guns, ammunition, etc. So, sir, as I said, this is an act not within my specialty. I have read it. It seems reasonable. It seems that the goals of it are, at the end of the day, to how can we reduce crime? And if we can reduce just one violent crime, it would be a success. But of course, I would like to see all crime gone. So as I understand it today, and what I understand up to now, I will listen with open ears and watch with open eyes for the balance of the debate this afternoon. But as it stands, in my understanding of this bill is a step in the right direction. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Malado. Senator Drakes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first start by also declaring I'm not a lawyer. And the Bill 2024 before us, I am sure the lawyers in the room will at some point have their to and fro in terms of its merits and demerits, and I look forward to that discussion. But, Mr. President, good afternoon, Senator Walcott. I continue, Mr. President. I know you wanted that one on your record, so I gave it to you. But we are talking about a serious topic today. Sir, if we search our minds, Senator King reminded me that it was either in 1992 or 1993 when Spice and Company had the song, Too Many Guns. Too Many Guns. That was in 1992, 1993. And we are now in 2024, still saying too many guns. And the root cause or root causes of the criminal element that seems to be manifesting itself and proliferating the society, family structure, things like values, discipline. There are a whole set of root causes, financial reasons. It is multifaceted. And it seems as though we are in a place where there's a certain section of our society, and I'm not going to spend long on this point, but I wanted to make it up front. There's a certain part of our society that is sowing seeds that do not benefit the wider society. And when I say that, I mean, for instance, when we talk about things like how do we discipline children, there's no consensus on that in Barbados anymore. Something as simple as that. How do we discipline children? How do we instill values? What type of values do we determine good or bad? What is the ethical mooring of a 2024 Barbados? And those are the types of conversations I think that when we start to delve into them, we will really then start to face what I call the social decay that is happening around us. But, Mr. President, there is one specific area that I want to focus on today. And Honourable Senator Blackman, he touched on it in his opening remarks when he tabled the bill. We do not manufacture firearms in this country. That is a fact, Mr. President. If we are coming today to deal with the crime after it is being committed, particularly with firearms, I, Mr. President, am leaning to where the source of the problem is today. What are we doing as a country, frontally and forcefully, to stop the importation of guns in this country, Mr. President? That is my question. I understand we have to deal with the criminal element on the ground. I understand we have to stop the young boys from shooting each other. I understand all of that. But there seems to be, in my estimation, and this is very personal for me, because Senator Blackman again said you could be wrong place, wrong time. But I was in the right place at the right time, because I was at home, in my bed, no more than 300 yards from my house, and someone was shot. So you could be in the right place at the right time, 11 o'clock at night. So it is personal for me that we seem to be avoiding the question and putting the right steps in place because it may be uncomfortable of who may be the persons responsible for it in regards to importing firearms in this country. Mr. President, I understand we need to deal with bail. But if you don't have the gun, you can't shoot it. How are they getting into this country? And Mr. President, I go further. Many times when you open the paper, it is a young man, we heard earlier, 19, 20, probably don't have many CXCs, whatever the case may be. How do you rationally sit down and say to yourself, he don't have a bank account, he probably got a few friends on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, he doesn't have any business connections, but he has an AK-47. How? If it is a case, it is coming through our borders. When I looked online, Mr. President, on the black market, high-power rifles go for between US $1,000 to $2,000. I don't know. I stand corrected. But if they're coming in by the 10s and the 20s, again, I don't know. It has to be somebody with means and resources. It is not the man that working for $200 a week that bringing in guns in Barbados, Mr. President. So the question has to be, are we going to be true to ourselves? Recognize there's an element of society which we may not want to confront, but we're saying today we have to do difficult things for the betterment of the country. So, Mr. President, I ask, regardless of who it may be, we have to show Barbadians that somebody has to start with the right investigation, has to start being charged once these things are known and reported, because a lot of things go unreported in this country as well, to show Barbadians that it is not just the black man, the small man, that is being caught up in the court system, because there is that element out there as well. So when you have a prime minister well-intended saying, say something if you know something, the person that sees something to say something, you say, well, I can't afford to say anything. Further to that, there may be people who have the means and resources who people may know are doing the wrong things in this country. But it is not convenient to say anything. Furthermore, they may even benefit from those said sources that are doing the wrong things. So that is where I stand today on this debate. I understand the focus on bail, but I know I speak for a lot of Barbadians who have had enough. And there has to be some organized activity happening in this country, because it can't be haphazard, ad hoc. Too many guns are on our streets. One, somebody's profiting from it. Two, there are people around those individuals who are also profiting from it. Get to the source. If they do not have the guns, they cannot shoot them. And Mr. President, they play small. Everybody know everybody. But when it's time to stand and say, here and no further, we are not allowing X, Y, or Z, we seem to retreat from the conversation. And unfortunately, there's a sentiment now that people believe something will only be done when it is a big up or somebody in their family. God forbid. That's when something will happen. That is when Barbadians will see action. But, Mr. President, people may think that I big up because I stand in here. But I come from a family in rural Barbados. I've been educated by University of West Indies, and I am saying to you today, we have to address the elephant in the room. Because the elephant in the room is nobody or somebody who does not have the means to even buy a car can organize themselves with external partners, because they ain't dropping out the sky, they're coming from somewhere. So the network is not even just in Barbados, it is overseas. And only a few people fall into that category. So let me be real, they play small, remember I say so. So just by process of elimination, you got a pool to work with, you got a sample. But no, we can raid the houses, we can go in Nelson Street, we can go in the pine. And Mr. President, don't get me wrong, as I said, 300 yards from my bedroom, somebody gets shot. You gotta do it, you gotta get them off the street. But don't get them off the street and where they're coming from still pouring in. It don't make no sense. You take them up today, 3, 4 more guns back on the street tomorrow. So I am asking, what is the strategy for, as was told today and said this morning, zero tolerance for crime? So we also want zero tolerance for the importation of illegal firearms in Barbados. Fix it, Mr. President. I am going to ask now as well, because we had somebody help me, a minister in the ministry of the, what was it? For crime, the Attorney General's office for crime. The MP in the other place. But let's go a step further. Let us get somebody who is independent to deal with crime in Barbados, whether they're from outside, inside the service, regional, whatever the case may be. Let's get a crime czar. We like names. Let's get a crime czar, Mr. President, an independent crime czar in Barbados. Let's take the politics out of it. If we're serious, Mr. President. Let's get somebody who is independent to have continuous updates and reports to Barbadians on what is happening in relation to crime. Because God forbid, we don't get this under control, we can come in here and pass all the legislation we want. When criminals get emboldened and they feel that they run their own government in their own block or neighborhood, we can come in here and talk till the cows come home. They're going to use their might. And when, as has happened already, not even the police force could go into the neighborhood because they got more high-powered rifles than the police force in Barbados. That's the Barbados we want to live in, that we punching above our weight. That's what we want to do. We cannot, Mr. President, allow this to get out of control. And for some people, it's already out of control. For some people, in some neighborhoods, it is already out of control. The children can't go outside and play. They feel unsafe day or night at the bus stop. They're on edge all the time. I know, Mr. President, because it took me a while to get over hearing the shots so close to my ear and then lying down in my bed. And then we normalize it, desensitize ourselves to it. The rest of the world is like this, and your point is, it don't happen, but hey, that's the stance we should take. Let the rest of the world go ahead. Let them have the proliferation of guns on their streets, but not in Barbados. That is where we draw the line in the sand. We're not a part of that global experiment. Law and order rules in Barbados, and we as a society say that is not what we stand for. Again, Mr. President, I will repeat. For me, I believe we have to work on dealing with the importation of firearms in Barbados. They only got a few ports. Only a few. Easy. Only a few. I do not know if there's still cameras in the port. I don't know if the scanners are working. I don't know, Mr. President. But something has gone fundamentally wrong somewhere. And the police must be allowed to do their job. I can say that again. The Barbados Police Service must be allowed to do their job. Whether it may be inconvenient for you politically, socially, financially, let them do their job. Mr. President, I want to raise two more things before I sit. We have a bill before us that speaks to serious crimes offenses. And making it more difficult for persons who commit those crimes to receive bail. When I go to the schedule, part 1, listed here in relation to those sections that specifically speak to the right of bail, sections 6, 7, and 11. Those offenses listed are 1, murder committed in circumstances set out in section 2.2 of the Offenses Against the Person Act. 2, treason. 3, high treason. And then 4 goes on, an offense under the Firearms Act, chapter 179, which is punishable with imprisonment for 10 years or more. I have a question. We have a Sexual Offences Act, 2002. Is rape not a serious crime?
Good question.
We have people in Barbados that consistently go before the law courts in relation to sexual offense. Mr. President, and they're still walking boat. Shouldn't we make it also more difficult for those people not to reoffend and terrorize the victims? Why is that not being contemplated? Child abuse, Mr. President, specifically molestation, I can call the word. That's not a serious crime. When people can do the types of things that are so I don't even, that traumatize people for the rest of their lives. They can't even function, Mr. President, in and out of the psychiatric ward and having to go to therapy because of the things that somebody did to them when they were 2, 3, 4, 5, even as teenagers. And we have people in our society that are even known. Oh, that boy like young girls. That's the kind of thing we hear. Oh, he like young boys. And we normalize this thing, Mr. President. And it asks Barbadians, what is it that we are doing in terms of building a functioning and safe society? When we come to this place, and again, I understand the focus on firearms and gun crimes because of what has been happening recently. But every day across this country, there are women and children who are affected by people in their families, workplaces. It does not matter, Mr. President. Some of the times, these people are known to the law courts. And if they're not known to the law courts because the person has not brought the courage to say this person has done these things to them, everybody in the workplace knows, their work colleagues know. But what do? Turn a blind eye. And shame victims into speaking up. Or for speaking up. So if we're going to talk about serious crime, in my estimation, Mr. President, rape, child abuse, particularly for reoffenders, because you have in your society persons who even feed off of the mere fact that they can terrorize people, and they abuse their positions of power to silence their victims. Silence them. But when I check, everybody in here at some point had to be a child. You ain't born big. You shouldn't be safe as a child. You should not have those protections. Every single person in here has come from a woman. Women in Barbados, we don't need protection. Mr. President, we have a lot of work to do in this country. And I'm saying that it starts from the social values and even further from that family unit. We are in a position today where it almost seems as though we are anti-family. We are anti-family. And ask ourselves if this is the direction that we want to go in. Because as much as we sit and we follow the outside world, bless their hearts, sometimes well-intended, there are a lot of things, Mr. President, that we know within ourselves because of our traditional Bajan values. We know they're wrong. We know they're wrong, and we can see the fruit of the seed, but we turn a blind eye. We turn a blind eye. So, Mr. President, I want to say and repeat, the source. The government has to deal with the source. The root causes are long-term solution, strategies, etc. But the source of firearms in Barbados, they're not manufactured here. Deal with whoever is bringing in the guns in Barbados. Whatever they may look like, how much money they may have, how well connected they may be, who they support, it does not matter. You want to know why, Mr. President, it does not matter? All those factors? Because bullets don't have no name. And the people that shooting now, Mr. President, these are the marksmen, you know. These guys are just pulling the trigger and hoping for the best. So God forbid, you happen to catch a stray bullet, and Barbadians have been exposed to that type of crime. He's shooting at a man in a van, you say no next to the man, and all hell broke loose. You either on your way to work or going home, and you have to be ducking and weaving, trying not to get hit. Deal with it at the source. Deal with it at the source, Mr. President. And in relation to the omissions of rape and child abuse as it relates to serious crimes, Mr. President, I await the government's response on how that can be incorporated as it relates to this bill. Mr. President, I am obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Drake. Speakers? Senator Watson.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. President. I know everybody's been waiting. Gear up. Mr. President, the focus of this debate here and in the other place has been crime. Crime is high, society is suffering from unrest, an interesting word, Mr. President. Right up there with the new favorite word being used by this government, in particular to justify its cybercrime bill that is actually an attack on freedom of expression. That word, Mr. President, is anarchy. We're hearing it a lot coming from the other side. Not in here necessarily. That bill hasn't come here yet, but it will come. So I understand that there is a temptation to focus on what the government thinks will rile people up. Temptation to gain a political win. But that win, if it occurs here today with this bill, is not going to be cheap at all. Barbados' citizens are going to pay the cost in the erosion of constitutional rights. And we will pay the cost that this callous approach to our legislative process, not affording senators time to review. We've heard the complaint hasn't been made directly in here, but senators have said I haven't been able to speak to this fully, and that is solely as a result of the short notice. I don't even know if you could call it notice. On a critical bill, a bill that goes to the heart of constitutional issues in this country. Yes, Barbadians are absolutely right to be concerned about the escalation in crime in Barbados. Nobody could say that they shouldn't be concerned. But the fact is, the bill can affect any Barbadian, Mr. President. We are here talking about gun crimes and serious crime, as though the bill only will relate to those crimes. Murder, treason, and Senator Drake has now introduced some others that she would like to see there. But there are so many statutes in this country that criminalize infractions of those statutes. This is indisputable. So anyone, any man, any woman, any child, 12 years and over, Mr. President, could find themselves before our courts having to apply for bail. This is a fact, indisputable. We just passed, for example, the Child Justice Act in here. I would think that the senators had sufficient time to read that act, Mr. President. Certainly a good deal more time than we have been given for this bill. And issues related to children and justice were the subject matter of that bill. And they must intersect with this bill, for example. I want to, Mr. President, digress a little. And I'm going to put the senators on the other side. I listened to the debate last time after I exited the chamber, Senator Morris referring to me as a one-trick pony. All the people who are, all of the, but Mr. You said it.
Sir.
A one-trick pony.
What's the point of order?
I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. President. Mr. President, he said it, and they're so disturbed about my energy justice advocacy. They're saying that now, but that's all right. Because what they need to understand is that it isn't about that. It is a focus on justice and constitutionality of government action in Barbados. That is the focus, Mr. President. So let's get moving in here. And I agree with Senator Blackman. It isn't just about the bill either. There are other matters. And some of the senators, Senator Walters, and some of the independent senators that have spoken today have spoken about other measures. That is the issue that there's mostly silence on the debate in the other place, and here so far from the government senators that have spoken, the other measures. The flip side of bail, Mr. President, is pretrial detention. Get bail or you're detained. It's that simple. And so, if you don't get bail, you'll find yourself in Dodge. Somebody asked me, what will happen if you don't get bail? You go to Dodge. It's that simple. Or, this legislation says, a reformatory or industrial school. I'm going to come to that later because I couldn't believe that I was saying those words in the bill either. Not given that we passed the Child Justice Act the other day and the Child Protection legislation. And I want members, all Barbadians, to understand who could find themselves in front of a judge asking for bail. That is important because it's not just the gun-toting young men from the block, contrary to what is being put out there, as far as I'm concerned, to stoke emotion, because we have to look at what we are passing. This bill doesn't just apply in that limited circumstance, and that is of key importance when we look at this today, because what if this bill passes? The government has signaled its intention by removing the proclamation section that it will go into the effect on gazetting. That could be as soon as tomorrow if the government can move fast enough. So let us understand what we are dealing with in here today. Right now, Mr. President, we are facing down a cybercrime bill that threatens imprisonment of ordinary Barbadian men, women, children for words. And government politicians are accusing ordinary people of using social media to stoke anarchy. 7 years, Mr. President. Potentially, you could be in front of a judge asking for bail for that. Any Barbadian. Road Traffic Act, if you don't approve, produce a license within the time that the act says, imprisonment. Potentially, you could be asking for bail for that. There's more. Anti-money laundering statute, Mr. President. And these are just examples. A real estate agent, a lawyer, an accountant doing a real estate deal. People setting up companies. People who are doing business transactions of a particular type. If you do not report on the criminal activities of a client, that's report. You could find yourself before the courts. That is a crime. You could be asking for bail because it's subject to imprisonment. I will mention the Integrity and Public Life Act is not law in this country, but maybe it will become one of these days. So politicians, public servants, and I am going to assume the people that break them, same thing, serious crime, imprisonment before a court asking for bail. Doctor who, by mishap, commits manslaughter, same thing, could be in front of a judge asking for bail because Bajans ain't taking it no more, so they are going to the courts on these matters. That is what we are talking about, in addition to the crimes that have been focused on in the debate so far. So let's ground our discussion in the fact that this bill goes far beyond the limited focus that has been taken up in this debate so far. And a lot of talk has been had about criminals on bail committing crime, or accused, let's call them accused, while on bail, or being victims of crime even. But you know what? It's anecdotal. Senator Boyce, Independent Senator Boyce, spoke to that in his presentation today. Where is the data? Anecdotal, Mr. President. And not only are the courts asking for it, but Barbadians deserve to know the facts before you tell us we have to accept what I'm going to demonstrate is a dangerous piece of legislation before us today. And I keep asking, how does bail prevent crime? Anybody can answer? Because I can't find the answer. How does bail prevent crime, Mr. President? Maybe a couple of people won't be killed by somebody who is out on bail, but only time can tell, Mr. President. And I want to refer to a document research that I've been able to come up with, and it is a 2021 study by Marmolejo et al. I'm going to make it a document of the House, Mr. President, electronically. Well, the clerk has the last set, so it is a document of the House. I'm told that I can do that electronically, and that's exactly what I did. Don't waste my time, Mr. Nichols. Exploring pretrial detention and pretrial processes in 5 Caribbean countries. Barbados is one, Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad, and another country that I can't remember off the top of my head, 2021. And the facts that I have discerned say that for Barbados, 57% of the population in Dodds are on remand. People on remand. The majority, Mr. President. I am sure that you are shocked to hear that, because we are being made to believe that our courts are setting the criminals out there to run rampant. And clearly that is not so, Mr. President. And the flip side, according to this study, is that the days between arrest and preliminary statement in court is 62 days on average, the highest among the 5. The other numbers are 20-something and in the teens, and we are keeping the people for 62 days on average before they can get into a court. And that goes to the issue of timeliness. That's what the courts are on about. Speedy trial, that is a right in our Constitution, Mr. President, and that is the actual fix on this issue of people getting out and committing crimes. Get them before the courts quickly, deal with the matter quickly, dispose of it, sentence them if they are found guilty, and put them in jail, Mr. President. That is the actual answer. And, you know, we've heard of the Jones against AG case, and it's clear as day to any lawyer, any real lawyer, that this amendment is about getting around that. But I don't actually have to allege that. The government has said it in press conferences, in the other place, and here today. That decision is problematic, but it is a constitutional ruling. And the answer isn't to attack the Constitution. The answer, the court gave it. Get the people in here quickly. Allow judges to exercise their discretion. Separation of powers is sacrosanct. So the answer isn't to pass this bill that I will show takes a shot at our Constitution, wrongfully so. Mr. President, we have to be deeply concerned. I want to say something, because I expect somebody's going to get up. We've heard talk about it's not esoteric and all that, and it isn't. Because I'm going to digress a little bit to share something. To share that I personally have the experience of losing a close family member to crime in this country not too long ago, Mr. President. I can't talk about it because it's still in the system. So I'm not detached. I wanted blood. I understand that. I understand that motivation, the desire for vengeance, but we cannot function that way. And I cannot set aside what I know to be right by my training and by my conscience, Mr. President, to pursue vengeance or to fuel the state in a pursuit of vengeance, Mr. President. I understand what the victim feels like. We're still feeling it. And I apologize to my family for bringing it up in here today. But we are not detached. I am not detached. But that does not allow me to set aside what I have been trained in. It does not allow me to say, justice be damned. We can't do it because we are here for justice and constitutionality. That's the basis of our work in this chamber, not politics. Mr. President, I'm going to look at some of the issues with the bill. A lot of people have not examined the bill. That troubles me, but I understand why, because we had a few hours, Mr. President. Clearly, even the person who laid the bill down in the other place and laid it here. Okay, you only got so many hours in a day. And we're all busy people, notwithstanding that it's been put abroad that the rest of us in here are lazy and won't do our jobs. We have to be concerned, Mr. President, about the newly introduced prosecution right of appeal against a grant of bail by a magistrate. The prosecutor need only say orally, I appeal the grant of bail. So here, I'm going to walk you through how the bill describes it. You apply for bail, the magistrate gives it with all of the parameters. You feel that you're about to walk out of the court. The prosecutor says, I oppose, I'm going to appeal. And you know what happens, Mr. President? Bail is revoked. Up to Dodds while you wait to get into a court for that appeal. Now, somebody's going to tell me, but there's a time limit. There's a time limit to get into the court, but there's not a time limit for the conclusion of the matter. So you could get in adjournment, and be back at Dodds. Because there is no time limit, here we are again with the timing issue. And it is not fixed by this bill. That is a management issue, a resources issue, Mr. President. And when I read that section, other lawyers, I've talked to some other lawyers who practice at criminal, I don't like to say criminal bar, Mr. President, who practice criminal law. So they're experts. Whoever don't like the term, they're experts. That's what they do every day. They live and breathe it, Mr. President. And the lawyers in here who know the criminal lawyers know that they're passionate about it. And they, and I think they would have the same reaction as me, which is, wait, what? Prosecutor could raise his hand and say, I oppose that, and then you're still headed to Dodds? Mr. President, that is stunning. So a magistrate gives bail on the merits, and a prosecutor could override it just like that, because that's the net effect of it. Next to the clauses, Mr. President, that exclude the constitutionally mandated jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Shocking, Mr. President. Unbelievably and inexplicably, there are clauses in this bill, Bill 2024, that block an appeal to our constitutional final appellate court, our apex court, the Caribbean Court of Justice. Let me say this again. Under this, we cannot wait for a week or two. Niger did not consult with anybody outside the government bill. We are saying that there are certain instances in which an accused person cannot get to the Caribbean Court of Justice. I was gobsmacked, Mr. President, when I read it. I'm not going to lie to you, it made my belly hurt me. I couldn't understand what I was reading. I read it several times over because I feel like I'll be wrong. I got to be wrong. But I'm going to read it so that there's clarity, not just for the people in here, but for Barbadians, because this is serious stuff, Mr. President. What does our Constitution say? 79C. There is established a judicature consisting of A, the Caribbean Court of Justice, and B, the Supreme Court and Magistrates Courts. 79D, 1C, the Caribbean Court of Justice shall be the final court of appeal from any decision given by the Court of Appeal. Let me read the offending clauses, Mr. President. 11.1. An application for bail by a person who is charged with an offense mentioned in Part 1 or Part 2 of the schedule shall be heard by the Chief Justice or judge of the High Court assigned by the Chief Justice. I'm going to skip Section 2. Let me go right to subsection 4. Subclause 4. Where bail is granted by the High Court to a defendant under this section, there shall be a right of appeal by the prosecutor to the Court of Appeal against the decision of the court. An appeal to the Court of Appeal under subsection 4 shall be heard by the Chief Justice or by Justice of Appeal assigned by the Chief Justice as is appropriate in the particular circumstances, and the decision of such judge shall be final. Shall be final. Let's talk about the offenses. We've heard about the part ones. Murder committed in certain circumstances, treason, high treason, firearms. Okay, we understand why those are serious crimes. We don't understand why those people can't get to the Court of Appeal. Sorry, to the CCJ. But the part 2 offenses, let's talk about them, because they were stunning to me. Murder committed in circumstances connected with the discharge of a person's official duties. 2, where the court is of the view that the strength of the evidence suggests that the defendant did not commit the offense with which he is charged. Where the court is satisfied on the evidence presented that the defendant would be able to rely on the defense of self-defense. I'm going to pause here again, because what I read here is so offensive and ridiculous, Mr. President. I am truly appalled. And I'm going to take it real slow. I will give an example of how this could work. Imagine, if you will, because it can happen through, you don't even have to imagine, it can happen through this bill, that if a murder is committed in circumstances connected with the discharge of a person's official duties, and they get bail and the prosecutor appeals, and is successful, that person cannot get to the CCJ to seek bail. Who would commit a murder while discharging official duties? I think the answer is obvious to everybody. A police officer, a BDF officer, a prison officer. Maybe there are some others, because there are others who have police powers, Mr. President. Mr. President, I, on my way here today, passed a joint force. Barbados Police Service, Task Force, what we used to call them, I think they have a different name now, and Defense Force personnel. Young men and women, you can look at them, they got baby faces still. Some of them had their faces covered even, checking vehicles, okay? And what if one of those young people that we employ to protect us had to be engaged using a firearm against somebody who had a high-powered weapon, and they shot that person? Prosecutor says murder. That person, that police officer, that defense force officer cannot get bail if a prosecutor appeals a grant. And they can't, well, they might get it because the court might say yes. But if the court says no, they cannot get to the CCJ, we are telling our protectors, we are not going to give you the constitutional right to get to our apex court in that circumstance. I am emotional about it because I can't compute it, Mr. President. I don't understand it at all. And if a person appears to be innocent or acting in self-defense, Mr. President, the Caribbean Court of Justice is the same court that Barbados' Attorney General sang the praises of when he agreed to the Needham's Point Declaration. I hope the people on the other side know what that declaration is, but I'm going to help because I'm going to read an excerpt from the press release coming out of the meeting that they held here late last year. I believe Senator Blackman referred to it, a 2-day symposium or some such thing. I quote, and I will make this a document of the House, Mr. President. CCJ Judge, the Honourable Mr. Justice Anderson, recounted the justification for the conference by noting that, quote, an alarming epidemic of crime and criminality has engulfed much of the Caribbean. Many of our citizens simply do not feel safe in their homes, at work, or in public spaces. At the same time, persons accused of crime are sometimes deprived of their freedom for 5, 10, 15 or more years before they are tried. These and other features of our criminal justice system are not acceptable. They must be reformed. There must be swift justice for the guilty so that there is a correlation between crime and punishment in the public perception. The innocent must not have their liberty and productive years sacrificed on the altar of inefficiency and disinterest. It is time for all victims of criminal justice to have real justice, unquote. Ironically, Mr. President, we are signatory to that declaration that came out of a symposium related to the Caribbean Court of Justice Academy for Law. But we are saying to some of our citizens, but you can't get by them. This bill, indisputable. It's clear as day what the provision says. And on the plus side, you know, the whole of Barbados has been trying to discern the mysterious constitutional amendments that have invoked the Section 49 notice. So on the plus side, here is one of them. In some instances, the Caribbean Court of Justice is no longer our final court of appeal. And as if the denial of access to the CCJ for those accused, including those falling under Part 2, was not enough, they're also denied access to the long-existing urgent bail application mechanism, so that potentially a Barbadian single parent of 2 or 3 children kills an attacker in self-defense or in defense of their family, lands before the court, wants to get back to their children. No, this bill says an application for bail by a person referred to in subsection 1, that's the Part 1 and Part 2 people, for an offense referred to in that subsection shall not be heard by the court unless a period of 72 hours has expired after the application for bail is made to the court. And the government feels proud about that. Mr. President, I am assuming that they didn't read it. That they get sent in from South Africa and they just PDF'd it and sent it to us. More clauses excluding the CCJ's jurisdiction, Mr. President. Clauses 22.2 and 22.3 of this bill. Let me read the words so nobody's attempted to tell me that I am wrong. A defendant who is aggrieved by the refusal of a lower court to admit the defendant to bail or by the imposition of such court of a condition of bail, including a condition relating to the amount of bail or an amendment of a condition of bail, may appeal against such refusal or imposition to a superior court. An appeal from a lower court lies to the High Court. I'm not going to read all of it. A decision under subsection 2 by the High Court or the Court of Appeal, as the case may be, shall be final. Caribbean Court of Justice eliminated. That is what we are being asked to do in here today. Mr. President, it is abhorrent. There's no other word, other words, but that is indisputable and shocking, Mr. President. Eroding rights, Mr. President, chipping away stealthily but with haste. And the government is beating their collective chests at it. Appealing to Barbadians' fear and discomfort while they take a cudgel to our rights and our constitutional protections, Mr. President. And any thinking Barbadian, I ain't gonna say right thinking, it just gotta be thinking, got to know it is wrong. And we have a Bail Act, and it's working because I already tell you 57% of the prison population are remand. And we're going to take this to shoehorn it into our legislation, to do violence, ironically, to our Constitution through the back door by a seemingly innocent act. Sticking the Section 49 notice, but refuse to tell Barbadians what the constitutional amendments are and feel proud of themselves, patting themselves on the back. Mr. President, why would our government do this? I've come to the conclusion that it's because the CCJ routinely criticizes Barbados for delays in our courts. The government knows they can't do anything about it because the delays still occur. So, chow away with the CCJ. That's the conclusion I've come to. I'm trying to convince myself that I'm wrong, but anybody who just reads the plain words would have to see that this is wrong, Mr. President. Wrong. However you look at it, it is wrong. And other problems, Clause 6.2, everybody talk about Clause 6, but Clause 6 has problems. Clause 6.2 introduces a fetter on the court's discretion, the very thing deemed unconstitutional about the existing act. People are going to say that's arguable, but this bill is not a fix on that ruling, Mr. President. And I could go on, but I'm not here to fix the short thrift work of the Attorney General and the Cabinet of Barbados, Mr. President. I'm just letting them know that we have discerned what the issues are. And I have taken note since 2018 of the careless attitude that this government takes towards their legislative initiatives, telling us, and they said it in the other place for this bill, we expect constitutional challenges, go court, that's what the court's there for. But let's talk about that, because it's not as simple as that. If you're going to court, you are in another case in the court, Mr. President, bottleneck. Backing up the system, and we don't have a constitutional court. They won't even do that, knowing that they're sending people to the court for constitutional matters all the time. They won't even have a constitutional court, Mr. President. And that means that you pass the law in a hurry, bottleneck, courts overwhelmed, the delays are compounded and compounded and compounded. And then it gets worse because the accused will say, well, I ain't on the law, I need some legal aid. Legal aid overburdened, underfunded, under-resourced, and the government ain't doing anything about that either. Ask the lawyers. I heard a story in talking to a lawyer about this, about lawyers who spend years in court and get $750 for a criminal matter from legal aid. So lawyers don't want to spend their time doing that work. They would like to be able to, because they're passionate about serving, but who's going to do that, Mr. President? And then if the bill is struck down, and I'm going to tell you, this one will be, lawyers are gearing up already. The deficiencies are blatant. You don't have a bill act. Back to square one. In fact, you're not back to square one because you've repealed Cap 122A. This one gets struck down. What are you going to do with people who you bring before the courts accused of serious crimes in the interim? It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Like, nobody sits down and looks at the end game. What's the real objective and walk back from there to come up with something rational, Mr. President? And I could talk about the reference to the bail rules. I'd say it briefly, if I won't talk about that, but that is problematic too. Cross-referring to rules that were passed in the year 2000, relating them to this bill. And Child Justice Act. There's a provision in this act, Mr. President, that, given that we just passed that act, I do not understand this provision, that seems to suggest that you could deny bail for a child, what is it? That if it is impractical to do so, the child is of so unruly a character that they cannot safely be detained, or because of the state of their mental health or mental condition, but the act doesn't say what happens when you deny bail to that child. Mr. President, that doesn't make any sense. It's the government that told us for years, we're going to do this work to make sure that children are protected, and then you have this massive lacuna in your brand new, spanking, beautiful bill that you're so proud of. Children, Mr. President. And I'm going to make it easy for the people in the Senate and outside who are trying to discern what the constitutional issues are. This is what I have discerned, Mr. President, and it's important for you because depending on what the changes are, it affects the vote that we take in here. Can we get a voice vote, or do we have to do the divide? That is why it's important, Mr. President. So, remove the CCJ as the final appellate court in certain instances. Fetter on judicial discretion. Removal of the presumption of innocence. Removal of the separation of powers. Amendment of the Bill of Rights. All of those are special majority provisions, Mr. President. All of them. And I find it fascinating that nobody in the government will identify them. Not the AG, not all the speakers, nobody in here, nobody. I feel ashamed. There should be shame. I feel shame. Because it's my country, and we do better than this. And we are governed by the rule of law. Constitutionality is important to us. And this is what we are bringing a sneaky bill to do, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have some things to suggest to the government. I can suggest a few of them. Proceeds a crime bill. Go after the money. Make crime not lucrative. Anti-money laundering. And add to the anti-money laundering law the people who are subject to that law don't take dirty money. Political candidates and political parties, Mr. President, take the money out of crime. Proper screening in the port don't unstuff containers outside of the port, Mr. President, and police the marinas. Those are things we need to do, and invoke the Income Tax Act, Mr. President. Business people in here getting audited, and people in this country living large and never work a day in their life. And everybody knows, and brag to come after law-abiding citizens, and we are watching people who clearly are living off of ill-gotten gains, don't pay no income tax, Mr. President, and our government is doing nothing. That's how they caught Al Capone, Mr. President, not for mowing down people in the street, for income tax evasion. I know you're going to tell me to wrap up, Mr. President, so I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to wrap up quickly. I am asking the senators to take cognizance of the assault on the Constitution that this bill is doing. Mr. President, I'm asking Barbadians to pay attention. It is stealthy. It is unacceptable. It is shocking. This bill should not pass in its present form. It is a hot mess, Mr. President. It is a wolf in sheep's clothing. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Watson. Was that Senator Tate? And you may make a presentation from a seated position.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this afternoon, this afternoon, the assumption is by most people that I'm going to be speaking about the law. But no, please. My concern is more about procedure and how this Bail Act has been burst. Senator Blackman spoke, he introduced the bill, and for the most part, I was not offended. But Mr. President, I have some concerns with how this bill has evolved. Senator Blackman made reference to the issue of the escalation of crime being a national priority for everybody. And I think generally there's a consensus that the issue that we are facing must be treated as a nonpartisan matter because it affects all of us, or all of us who are interested in what is happening in our beloved Barbados. My concern about this bill is how it has been brought to us. Now, in the past, there have been comments by senators on the government side saying that we on this side want us to go slow. My issue isn't about going fast or slow. My issue is about being efficient about what we do. It's important that when we are passing legislation or we are dealing with legislation, that we take the time to ensure that it makes sense, that we're not faced with numerous amendments, because then you lose track on what the law is. I have been saying that in here since I've been here in 2018. Every amendment means that you do not know eventually, if you keep amending every 3 months, when you're finished, you could be in the Court of Appeal arguing a point that you do not know has been repealed or amended, because there's no time to document it in the consolidated index. And you're operating in an environment where you could be before the court and you have different pieces of paper, because it's not as if when there's an amendment, you're getting the whole act with the amendment. You get an amendment, 2 pages telling you, go back to 2 pieces of legislation prior and connect the dots. That is not conducive to smooth practice of law, to the smooth practice of law as far as I'm concerned. It is onerous on those of us who have to practice in the law courts of Barbados. There's an expectation or a belief that every lawyer knows every area of law. So there's an assumption. I'm a lawyer, I'm a Queen's Counsel, so therefore I'm familiar and I know everything there is to know about criminal law. That's a joke. That's like saying that Dr. Maynard, who is an esteemed ENT specialist, who has saved lives as shared by Senator Morris, will agree without more to do a brain surgery. Not that he can't, but that's not what he's going to do immediately or right off. But there has to be extenuating circumstances. So my first concern was how we were made aware of this bill. On Thursday, an email was sent to, it reached my inbox at 12:17 p.m. advising me that I had been invited to a meeting to discuss the bill with the Attorney General. Now, I didn't see it at 12:17, because at 12:17, I was practicing law and working for my clients. Because I do not work for the government. I am not at the beck and call of the government. And the Senate does not pay me to be at the beck and call of the government. So I actually was advised by a colleague. But we're being invited on Thursday last week to a meeting the next day, less than 24 hours later, at 2 p.m. But at that point, we did not have the bill. The bill hit my inbox that evening at 6:27 p.m. So if I was going to be coming to the meeting, which I could not, I would have been having to look at the bill with nothing else to do, because I was expecting that email to be ready for a meeting with the Attorney General at 2. Now, I personally think that the request for the invitation was not appropriate. I do not think it is proper for a member of Parliament to ask us to do anything, because we're the upper chamber. But that's me. That's my understanding of the procedures. That is not up for debate. That is not anything that I'm trying to make the point, except that. What am I coming to the meeting to do? Why am I not being given an opportunity to look at the legislation? And if I have challenges, then we take it from there. What was the agenda? When you behave like this, you invoke and you encourage. 1, what's happening? 2, what's the rush? 3, what's up? 4, this is suspicious. Then you start hearing certain persons are being called and they're being told it's being debated today. So in less than a week, we are to be dealing with a bill that, according to the senator who led the bill, is a national priority. How does a national priority not require proper notice? That's my first issue. Then you have attorneys of great esteem in the Senate who can rewrite a spell, some better than others. You need to give those attorneys an opportunity, if they were able to attend a meeting, to take in this 33-page bill and all the nuances that come with it, to be properly informed. I do not understand the government rushing bills of this magnitude. The government's record is clear. Rush work 9 times out of 10 means an amendment. And in some horrific cases, it means an actual repeal. Case in point, the National Insurance Act that was repealed within 3 months, and we had to come again, not amended, repealed. So our history dictates we need to take time doing these things. The subject matter demands that you need to take time. Now, here's the thing. In the area of law that I am familiar with, which is employment law, we frown on employers who fire people and don't give them their green paper, don't give them their money. Come back. What is the fired person doing back on your premises? You knew they didn't, that you're going to fire them. Be ready, give them what is for them, let them go about their business. If they're going to sue you, so be it. But you should not be putting an employee that you have control over in the position to have to come back at you. By the same token, the Barbados Labour Party government, Mr. President, has, I was going to say 30 seats, but up to recently had 30 seats. Twice, Mr. President. And if we, by some chance, fall on our head and forget, they let us know They let us, really remind us. And these days, the newest thing from Senator Blackman is, the other senators say Barbados Labour Party, but Senator Blackman is old school. So you'll hear him say Labour Party this and Labour Party that. Those of us who are a little older will smile at that. That's old school talk. I say this to say, with 30 seats, you are in control. Crime happening ever since. Get the bill ready, pull you who you need to pull from whichever legal department, from whichever ministry, pull it together, give it to us, because you know what is happening in the Senate, which wasn't happening before. You have people who are actually reading, who are willing to contribute, who come and help you draft, who give you suggestions. Now, the Barbados Labour Party government behaves sometimes like it is their way or no way. Sometimes, most of the time, they have this arrogance, well, it's our way, we passing it, and pass anyhow, so we don't want to hear you, we're not changing. That's my opinion. Don't come for me. That's my opinion. On the odd occasion when it's an unusual area, you will let Senator Drake give a definition. Because you know that area that she good at, nobody else didn't know what it is because it's not English for me. You take her definition. Every once in a while, you would take a definition from Senator Boyce, whether it's right or not. You're going to take it because he offers. I don't offer because consultants make a lot of money in this government. You want me to help you, pay me. I ain't ashamed. I ain't offering. I can tell you what's wrong. Senator Walker knows I will show you what's wrong, but I'm not going to tell you how to fix it. You have your people to fix it. 36 means that you could have given us more time to work on this bill. You know what else 36 says? You bring a bill. The Bar Association, if they're not currently meeting, they have met. You didn't send it to the bar, but you know where the criminal law lawyers are? Within the Bar Association. So I can tell you procedurally what I have a problem with. But in terms of the criminal law, yes, I can rewrite and spell, but what's trending, what's current, what has been amended, and what's happening now, that's not me. I would have to go and look for it. There's some people who can come and tell you it because that's what they do every day. Why wasn't this shared with the people who have to work with it? You can read this, and this can read properly from section 1 to page 33, and it reads well. But if you don't know the area, you don't know what's missing. You can't know because you don't know what to look for. It's like please read this contract for me. If you are an employment law lawyer, you're going to see things that a family law lawyer may not see. If you are doing a contract for a building estate, Senator Thompson could tell you there are certain things that you put in for the building estate conveyance that you may not put in for a tenancy. Oh my word. Let the right people have sight of the bill. In certain jurisdictions in the region, you cannot bring legislation unless you let the Bar Association see it first. Why are we doing this? And then, right throughout, there's mention of all these people. The court, police officer, magistrate, judge, chief justice. All of them shall be given decisions. Thank you very much, Senator Blackman, for highlighting that this morning, because I am one who never got to finish reading this entire piece of legislation. You highlighted it. I went to look because you said it. You know how it is with me and you. I digress, Mr. President. You did not hear that. All of these people are being called upon to issue a decision in a prescribed form, Mr. President. You listening to me, Mr. President? I know you are. Don't answer. That was rhetorical. Senator Thompson is going to call me. I apologize in advance. She can call. She does. Sorry, sir. I already have the look. But the prescribed form is not in the bill. It's not here. The government keeps giving us legislation, makes reference to rules and schedules. Y'all know it coming. It is a national priority. Crime is off the charts. Please don't misunderstand me. Everything Senator Blackman and Senator Drake, I endorse that about rape and child abuse, and I would add to that too, domestic violence at its worst form is at the level of serious crime. We have people killing people. You know what? You know why you don't know? Because there's a stigma attached to domestic violence. So it's not out there. If you are killed, they're not going to see. You have to know the family to know that somebody died at the hands of a spouse. But women are going to put on foundation. They're not going to let you see. I will tell y'all now. I mark easily, I wear all my marks, I come in, I'm doing a press conference. Do not hit me. But I don't think the person who would hit me is born and their mother's dead, so that's not an issue. I digress, I move on. Mr. President, you have prescribed rules. So you are indicating in this bill that these various officers shall, not may, shall write the decisions in order for the bail procedure to proceed. You don't have the rules, so you don't have the prescribed form, and you know what else? Have you spoken to the magistrates? Have you spoken to the judges and told them you just added to their workload? And everybody who is anybody will be quick to find fault with the magistrates and the judges and the backlog. But somebody in here today talked about HR and asked if they're getting enough help to get the job done. So will these officers, and this officer is the court, it is the police officer, the court, the judge assigned by the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice hit the ground running. Our Chief Justice, we getting emails, he's trying to get things together. He's dealing with backlog. He want to know which decisions are outstanding, which cases are outstanding. Are they getting personnel to do these decisions that they shall have to do? And the other thing that is silent in this bill, what happens if they don't, or what happens if they do after 6 weeks? In the meantime, what is happening to the accused who's supposed to get bail? What is the provision? I'm just asking. But y'all bring it, and then you want me to vote for it. And if I don't, just as how you did with the death penalty, we are the worst people in the world. We are trying to get in the way of government's policy. We are the worst people in the world. We're the reason that murderers were walking around over the death penalty. I know y'all did. Y'all come and bring back the same legislation. You fixed it quietly without any fanfare, and you used the same suggestion for amendment that Senator Boyce suggested from the beginning. Nobody want to go slow. We want to go efficient. If it's a national priority, you will get nonpartisan involvement. You will get support. But how you want me to support that which is inky-dinky, INKY-DINKY. It's not a normal word, but I spelled it for whoever's listening. Mr. President, it doesn't make sense. You can bring what you want, you can bring it quickly, but start before you declare it. You are in charge. You have 30 seats. Oh Lord, sorry. Thank you, Senator Thompson. 29. So if we don't support, because we get calls, we were asked, what are you doing? It was that alone would tell you, okay, something's up. Because y'all don't call us. You don't even check to see if you're good. That was you. That was for you. That was for you. Anyway, so why, Mr. President? This is of national importance. That is not in dispute. The criminals in Barbados have gone stark raving crazy. Their behavior is one of whatlessness and indifference. I agree that it is required. We need to be reining it in. Senator Boyce and Welly said it. We all agree. That is not in dispute. But when you want to fix, come properly. Who is going to do these decisions that y'all are shelling at these people and they probably don't even know? It is my understanding the police are not aware of this. I don't know which police I'm hearing. The police who are going to have to deal with this are unaware of this new bail act. I am made to understand members of the judiciary are unaware of this new bail act and the content. And you know why I believe that? Because as I said, we were being invited to a meeting before we even saw what we were being invited to a meeting to discuss. Nobody, I'm going on the record, I'm going to say for the third or fourth time, I have no difficulty with trying to get things in a way that we are a safe and secure place to be. But when we are going to be affecting people's rights, liberties, and when we are going to be messing with the Constitution, this is not how you do it. The Constitution is major. Don't mind this government gets on it. They can change it every 3 months. It is supposed to be enshrined and untouchable. You change it when it's absolutely necessary, and you change it when you're sure and when you are ready. How you bring this and you ain't give me the rules that would allow me to carry out what you say to do? Seriously, Mr. President? That's okay, because I know I'm right. We need to rein it in. We need to take time to coordinate and do things properly, Mr. President. This bill in its current form, to my estimation, isn't ready to allow for an amendment anywhere in the Constitution, for the simple reason that the section part 3, which specifically deals with the bail procedure, throughout that section, it speaks to issuing the decision in the prescribed manner. In this section, prescribed by rules made under this act. In this section, prescribed means in relation to the decision of a court, rules under this act. In this section, prescribed means prescribed by rules made under this act. I've got this all over the most important section of the of the bill as it relates to execution. And you ain't got the rules? You don't have the prescribed form. So are you saying that that's a deterrent? Don't get hold and don't try to get bail because they're not the prescribed form and you can't get the bail. What's happening? Do things properly. This is not the first time that we've been given a piece of legislation and it was passed and rules are to be done by a minister of government or whatever, and then years pass, you never get the rules, and then all of a sudden we get back a piece of legislation and we know dealing with the rules. That's flawed. Especially if within the body you can't find what is fundamental to the procedure and the execution of that which you're trying to address. So it allows for people to get and say you follow something and you really don't mean for people to get bail. But you're saying it, lip service. That's not fair. Because I do not think that's the intention of the government. But if you pass and you bring a bill for which there are prescribed rules, and then you don't have the rules, what are you saying? You have 30 seats. You can do anything because you're doing anything. So get this right. You have 30 seats. I beg your pardon, 29. 59. 59, 30 and 29 is 59. Twice, Mr. President. So you want to be pat on the back and you're doing the bail act and you don't want anybody to accuse you of trying to circumvent the case law, and you don't want anybody to accuse you of trying, you don't want to wait. You don't want to be hamstrung. You don't want to do all these kind of things. But then we have this. So, Mr. President, the Bail Act may have a genesis and good intention. There could even be an argument that there's a need to enhance that which existed before. I can't say because I certainly did not have time to go into it in depth. You can't tell me Thursday, send it to me Friday or Thursday night and expect me to be ready today in totality. But I know enough with a cursory glance to know that this is deficient. And something as important as the Bail Act and the way it's being heralded should not have any deficiencies. We've had this bad crime thing going on long enough. And what I would say is if you conferred more with your stakeholders, you might have ended up with a better product. So it is either that you feel that nobody else is as good as you, but then you always go repeal whole acts, or everybody's beneath you, so you're not going to, or it's just not important. But I'm a Queen's Counsel. I cannot say yes to that which doesn't add up, sir. It will confuse me. It's deficient. I want to thank you, sir, for allowing me to speak this afternoon. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tate. Senator Nicholas.
Mr. President, I'm obliged to you for the opportunity to participate in this debate. So I propose to confine my contribution to the legislative intent behind this bill. The bill proposes to repeal and replace the current Bail Act. And as we can see from the provisions, not all of the sections of the extant Bail Act have been excised. If indeed, a large part of the existing law as it relates to bail still is replicated in the bill under consideration. But in order for the new provisions that, in the judgment of this government, that are necessary to be implemented at this time, it was felt that rather than to add them into the present law, that the entirety of the bill should run by way of repealing it and putting it in a form that is inherently consistent, rather than having to put a piece onto an existing legislation. Mr. President, I wouldn't propose to segue into the wider debate about crime and violence and the viciousness of gun crime and its prevalence, its causes for these things. There are other honourable senators in this House who have made those contributions and are capable of dealing with those subjects. I am also conscious of my allotted time and as I said, the expertise in this House. Sir, the long title of this bill says that we are here to revise the law relating to the provision for bail, and it also is a bill that is enacted under the Constitution of Barbados. That latter intent of the bill sometimes excites this notion that we are out there doing something sinister. But what I would want to do in my time, Mr. President, is to show the correlation or the connection or the link between the subject of bail and our Constitution. I propose, Mr. President, in my presentation to ask, I believe, 5 broad questions, and I hope that time permits me to address these matters. What is the state of the law as it relates to bail, and what is the Constitution of Barbados implicated? 2, what has Parliament done on bail? 3, what has been the court's response to Parliament's actions? 4, how should government proceed? And 5, has this bill achieved an acceptable balance? I go first to, Mr. President, the state of the law. What is the state of the law as it relates to bail, and how is the Constitution implicated? Mr. President, I have discerned there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about the whole question of bail in society. I saw, for example, only 2 or 3 Sundays ago, a letter authored by one of our regular visitors to this House, reporting or indicating that they were a lawyer and making the bold and bald assertion that there's no constitutional right to bail and that the law is settled that you cannot get bail for murder and so forth. The starting point will, for me, have to be the Constitution. And the reason why the Constitution is implicated in this is because there is a right to personal liberty in the Constitution of Barbados. So we have to start there. The denial of bail, on its face, is the court remanding a person to prison when they are charged with an offense before the courts. So that implicitly from the beginning, the denial of bail is an infringement on that right to personal liberty in the Constitution of Barbados. So that anytime the laws of this country are being repealed and replaced or adjusted or through any legislative means, there is the starting point that there is a right to personal liberty in the Constitution. And any derogations, any interferences with that right to personal liberty must take into consideration whether the laws are reasonably justifiable, whether there's a proportionate basis for this law to be implemented. I've heard also that the Barbados Constitution is silent as it relates to bail. Now, the truth is that you will not find that there is a right to bail specified in those terms in the Constitution. But if you interrogate the aforementioned protection for the right to personal liberty, you will see, Mr. President, that upon reasonable suspicion of having committed an offense, or someone is arrested, they have to be taken to a court as soon as is reasonably practical. And if they are not tried within reasonable time, they have to be released either unconditionally or on such conditions as the court may affix. That is in the Constitution. So essentially the Constitution of Barbados is saying if a person is charged with a criminal offense, or if there's reasonable suspicion that they're likely to commit one, you have to take them to a court. And the court, if you do not try them within a reasonable time, you have to release them on conditions or unconditionally. So that in any interpretation is the constitutional guarantee of a right to bail. So therefore, any provisions dealing with how bail and the jurisdiction and the discretion of the court is to be exercised implicates the Constitution. So there is nothing sinister about the enactment in its long title stating that it is enacting pursuant to Section 49 of the Constitution. Because Section 49 of the Constitution of Barbados is the provision that deals with the alteration of the Constitution. And I made a point in here, Mr. President, that proper lawyers do not speak about the amendment of the Constitution. Because the amendment is one of the ways in which the Constitution can be altered. An amendment speaks to changes in the text. But what we have here is the constitutional right to freedom, the right to personal liberty, says that no person shall be deprived of their liberty, their personal liberty, unless provided by law. And it goes into 10 different scenarios where your personal liberty can be deprived in accordance to law. So if it is now that the government is the government's judgment that there is a danger to this society, where there is clear evidence that persons who have been charged with murders have already been released on bail, persons who have been murdered in this country were recently released on bail, then it is the duty of the government to address that. And that is what one of the main changes to the Barbadian law as it relates to bail, that this bill purports to bring into force, addresses. And Mr. President, I said that I wanted to address a number of questions, and I know that time is limited, and so perhaps I should get to those questions. So that is the state of the law as it relates to bail. We have a Bail Act. It makes provisions for bail. Now, there has been 2 amendments to the Bail Act since it was first introduced in Barbados. 2 amendments. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the amendments, or I should say the first amendment, this act came into force in 2001. The present act. And it was amended to make sure that a person charged with murder could only get bail on an application before a high court judge. It therefore took away the right to apply for bail in the magistrate's court, or what people call the lower court. Could only go before the high court for murder. And there was this concomitant practice where people hardly ever got bail for murder in Barbados. When it first came to the bar more than 2 decades ago, there was no practice, there was no issue in the country of a person being charged with murder ever getting bail. Yeah. But we've had a situation where Barbados has carried out its criminal justice system with 2 judges. Because when it came to the bar, there were only 5 high court judges. 2 sat in the high court doing criminal matters. And we used to have assizes. Fellas blow the trumpet to start the October assizes, the January assizes, the April assizes, and going down the road and things began. And at the end of those assizes, the criminal court shut, but the civil court judges were still working. That is the system that we started, that I started in. But the crime in the country was not waiting on the assizes. And it was only up to 2018 that we moved from 2 criminal courts in high courts. And it always boggled my mind that when I read a West Indian law report, you saw judges in Trinidad, all of these judges, 30-something, 40-something judges, Jamaica the same thing. And the criminal division has 20 judges. But in 2018, we were only dealing with 2. You want to know why we have a backlog of 1,600 now? We want to know why a man who was charged with a shooting case in 2011 is before the courts last week. Because we only were dealing with 2 judges. And this is not to blame anybody, because one of the things we as Barbadians have to accept is that, and I think the late Professor, the Right Honourable Wayne used to say this, we will always be victims of our own successes. We had a criminal justice system, an education system, a public service, police, everything that worked well, and Barbados was a beacon, a leader in the Caribbean. But we felt that these things could not be changed. And when these systems ran their natural courses, we felt Barbadians are totally resistant to any change at all. So what we had in the country, Mr. President, was a situation where crime was rampant, escalating in scope. And the nature of crime has changed. 2 criminal courts. Some will argue that the increase to 5 and then the increase to 8 might be insufficient given the level of the backlog. But if you move to 8 now, then we say the civil judges now need more help, need more resources. And it's really and truly, when you're sitting in that seat, only so much resources that you can throw to all the problems that the countries face. It is therefore a balancing act. Now, one of the challenges that we have faced, Mr. President, is that Parliament, the government in its judgment in 2019 said, look, this is how we will fix this problem. Can't have a man getting gunned down in a shopping mall in the full glare of the public where he just got released on bail and was on a murder charge. We don't know for a fact. It may be a retaliatory, it may be gang related, we don't know. But this kind of thing shocked the conscience of the society. And the government said, look, this is how we can deal with it. If you are charged with a firearm related offense, murder, treason, high treason, you cannot apply for bail. Some of the boys was right. Some said from the outset that it will be challenged and maybe challenged successfully. But I want to say this to the Honourable Senate. This is a parliamentary institution, the Senate. We are one arm of government. And don't fear, and it is not, as Senator Watson suggested, that there's arrogance on the part of the government. I want to say this as a practicing lawyer, sir. I hope at the risk of being labelled immodest. I understand what it is to bring actions before the court to strike down laws of Barbados. And since this country has become a republic, I have on 2 occasions represented litigants who have got laws in Barbados struck down, even as part of this government. I don't feel any parliamentary weight on me for being able to represent the interests of people in doing so. So there's no arrogance on the part of the government. But what I want to say that in looking at the context of the separation of powers, it is the province of the parliament to pass the laws, to achieve the balance between the interests of the accused person who has a right to due process before the courts and the interests of the community who's affected by the crime. The interests of the community which may be affected not only by the depravity of the circumstances of the crime, but ensuring that that person who is charged gets their day in court and the victims of that crime get the opportunity to get justice. That has to be balanced. And who balances it? It has to be Parliament. And parliaments across the world in the democratic systems of governance that we have will not always get it right. The courts determine whether you get that balance right without the court itself saying where the balance should be drawn. Because then the judges will be accused of dealing with the political, macro-political, macro-social, macroeconomic issues that are not the province for judges. You hear those criticisms in other countries. You hear them in the US all the time, how the courts are political. But in our system, sir, there is no reticence on the part of a government for saying, look, we are going to address the crime in this way. And if we have got it wrong, we respect the decisions of the court. This Barbados Labour Party, the Labour Party, as Senator Tate likes to hear, is not the party that said when the court ruled against it that we will pull Barbados out of the Caribbean Court of Justice and accuse the judges as politicians wearing robes. Not the Barbados Labour Party. We appealed the decision of the High Court judge, and in reading the decision of Lamar Jones, as I have to do, the court said, one, a law enacted under Section 49 of the Constitution to make changes to the provisions for the grant of bail is perfect. Government can do that. Even without changing, or as you should say, I don't want to say bush lawyers, the non-lawyers in the community would say amending the Constitution. But the text hasn't changed, so it creates problems in their minds. But that is a problem for another day. But even where you have amended the Constitution with the constitutional majority, it is still the province of the judiciary to determine whether that constitutional amendment is constitutional. And I want to say this, for those of you jumping up saying the government get liquor, it is the first time in Barbados that a constitutional amendment has ever been held to be unconstitutional by the courts. It has only happened in the Commonwealth Caribbean on 3 occasions in one country, in Belize. It is something that is new to the jurisprudence. And one of the questions is whether or not, having satisfied the requirements of the constitutional mandating majority, whether it is still the province of the courts to rule something that is unconstitutional. Is this something new? This is something novel. In other words, when a law is inconsistent with the Constitution, it can be the Constitution itself. It's no question that is no baffling legal scholars right now. So that this amendment that we brought in 2019 that was struck down by the court, and when you read the decision of the court bemoaned the fact, I want the evidence that motivated government's intent. It was not put before the court, and this is not to put shame on the lawyers who argued the case for government. The Court of Appeal admitted that evidence on appeal. The statements from Parliament, the Attorney General, evidence from the Commissioner of Police showing the commission of these crimes, because in assessing the proportionality of the law, the court wanted to see what motivating factors, so the court can assess whether the balance was struck by the legislature. So what we have here is this notion that a parliament must be perfect in all its work. No, it is the judgment of the legislative branch of government in a democracy to draw that balance by way of the Constitution or by any laws that are implicated by constitutional change. And it is for for the courts to assess whether that balance has been struck. So that was government's response So, looking around the region, Trinidad amended their bail act and said that you cannot get bail for murder. They put it in the act. The Privy Council struck it down. Why? This is a very simple point. The decision to grant or withhold bail is a judicial decision. Parliament, you can make any law you want. You can set all the conditions that the courts must look at to grant bail and all the conditions that the court should look at to refuse bail. You can add more to them. But you cannot take away that decision-making power of the court. It is not a legislative power. It is a judicial power. So that was the basis on which the Privy Council struck down the Trinidadian Amendment. This government did not go there. What did the government do, Mr. President? The government looked at the legislation in the Republic of South Africa. And what we have done in relation to the serious crimes of murder, treason, high treason, and firearm offenses is to put a condition. You can get your bail, yes, but you have to demonstrate special or exceptional circumstances to allow you to get bail. So that what is implicated by the constitutional change that is contemplated in this amendment is that this is not a law that adds to the aforementioned 10 conditions that exist. So there is no textual amendment to the Constitution. Mr. President, a number of concerns have been raised. I don't know if time will permit me to address them. One I heard outside of this chamber, Mr. President, I wish, not challenging your judgment, that I could be like Senator Tate and Senator Watson and Senator Thompson, but there may be some commonality with them that I do not share. But sir, the first thing
the commonality is that you all have 30 minutes. They all have 30 minutes. That's the commonality.
Mr. President, I heard about an attack on the Constitution. I heard about taking a shot at the Constitution wrongfully and all these things. Which third-tier appellate court in the world does hear bail hearings? Which one? Does the Caribbean Court of Justice presently determine whether a person should get bail? Did the Privy Council before? I went out to the chair, I checked with my colleagues in Trinidad and Jamaicans, colleagues and Grenadians haven't responded yet. Which, because I've never seen a decision of the United Kingdom Privy Council determining whether somebody was wrongfully denied bail by a magistrate or a judge. The jurisdiction of the third-tier appellate court is prescribed in law. And if you check our Caribbean Court of Justice Act, it sets out a right to appeal, appeals as a right, and appeals with leave. And I didn't want to quieten this thing that the government is so wicked and we taking away appeals from the Caribbean Court of Justice. First thing you teach here in law is understand the jurisdiction of the court. Or understand the jurisdiction of the court. But I have never read a Privy Council decision, or does the United States Supreme Court give decisions on people who get bail? They have a grand jury. But all this political theater to excite people that the government is so wicked that we take it away. Oh, dear, I'm going to read the Caribbean Court of Justice Act. Come on. And this is not to say that if the issue of the constitutionality of the actions, at the end of the day, the Caribbean Court of Justice is the arbiter, the final arbiter of its own jurisdiction. So even if Parliament says the appeal at the level of the Court of Appeal shall be final, that's what Parliament said. That's what Parliament said. The Caribbean Court of Justice will be the final. In fact, look, I was part of an appeal, Mr. President, where the bail was refused. And the accused person appealed. And one of the arguments of the government is that you don't appeal refusals of bail in Barbados. All you do is apply in another 3 months and see if you get a different judge. And the Court of Appeal said, constrain the legislation. You can't, the government, you can't be court of justice, they can't be court. But you know what happened? There is a right to appeal a refusal of bail, but the criminal lawyers at the criminal bar don't avail themselves of that decision. You want to know why? Why am I appealing this decision when my client ain't get bail when the rules and the law provides that I can apply again? But you don't want to make it sound that the government is trampling on people's rights. There is, I could be wrong, Mr. President, and I quote my good friend late Smokey Brown, and I probably am wrong regularly. But I do not see any third-tier appellate court in the world making decisions as to whether a person should get bail or not. In fact, when you look at the Privy Council said to Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean that's still using them, we can put you all through a sufficiency test because they got certain questions that are coming up to us that really and truly should be dealt with your lower courts. We only want to deal with the big matters, right? Only if you were the chair. So that if there are any offending provisions in this act, Mr. President, the suggestion was that the whole bill, because we repeal and replace the whole bill, has to go through the act. But something tells me that when you're in first year law and legal systems, I think Senator Boyce might correct me, or any two Senator Boyces, that there's something called severance. So the first thing the court has to do is to determine whether the offending provision can be severed, and if, by way of severing it, if the whole thing falls apart without it. Hardly could be that there could be no law as it relates to the bill. But in any event, the Constitution gives you the right to be released on conditions or unconditionally. So I'm looking at Senator Tate because I cannot help looking at my friend, my big sister, Mr. President, but I'm not referring to anything that she has said. So that this bill requires no, you go down to the magistrate's court, the policeman say, I'm objecting to the bill on the grounds. This is a serious case, and the accused man is likely to interfere with witnesses, and the accused man, we can't sure if he come back to court. Can't do that now. Can't do that now. You gotta give reasons. You gotta bring evidence. And, Mr. President, permit me to deal with one last point. There was this notion that because of a recused person must now bring exceptional circumstances to show why he should get bail, is now a reversal of the presumption of innocence. The very Constitution in Barbados, Section 18 says that you can reverse the presumption of innocence. But that is not the reversal of the legal burden of the state to prove that the person is guilty. Because we're not dealing with a trial. This is not the trial, but this is a reversal of an evidential burden. So where the state sets up evidence why you should not get bail, you can show that I got rock solid alibi. I wasn't even in Barbados at the time. You can bring your evidence. It's a reversal, and this is only in relation to the sufficiency of the bail hearing at that stage, not the criminal trial. So there's no reversal of the presumption of innocence on a legal standard or the legal burden. It is only the evidential burden at the bail hearing. And constitutional courts all over the world have said that there is the Strasbourg jurisprudence of the European Human Rights Court of Justice has also determined in its several judgments that on the question of bail, this is not a criminal matter. It is not the determination of the criminal matter. I know that everybody has not had the opportunity to do it, but it's the judgment of the government, sir, that we can't have a lax attitude with AR-15 rifles and M16 and Uzi and all kind of thing and big Glock and big gun about the place and men in social media. Terrorizing the community, that is a new provision of this bill. Shock and outrage. Imagine a judge hearing the evidence of the prosecution and saying, well, look, he bill. No, Parliament has the right to say that the judge must take these factors into consideration, and if those factors are present, but the evidence placed before it, it can't get bail. But that is a legitimate denial of the personal liberty that any accused person will have. It is not an illegitimate denial. It is for a reasonable purpose in a society. So, let me get real, sir. Let me get real. Bill doesn't say, I will not put no, sir. Bill does not require these provisions in the bill that hopefully will pass into law. Yes, they will be tested, and I say that we're not necessarily perfect. Yeah, no, perfect. No, nothing is perfect. But the government is, in its judgment, saying this is where we need to go. We have looked at all of the relevant constitutional tests, and this is the one that does not take away any jurisdiction of the court. The decision to grant bail still resides in the judge. The circumstances where you can or cannot get bail are prescribed by law, and decisions have to be made. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I will support this bill because I know in my heartest of hearts that there's no violence to the Constitution of Barbados. The Constitution of Barbados is necessarily implicated in any determination to refuse a person bail. To you, I'm much obliged, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Nichols. Speakers? Senator Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not roll with the heavy roller, sir, and I don't have any legal opinions. But, sir, this bill amendment, sir, and we focus in both houses on not treason and high treason, merely on surge and firearm crime. And we seem to have failed to mention its impact on our healthcare system and all the delays and the resources that it consumes. I support the bill, sir. But the bill deals with matters after the fact. It deals with matters after the crime has been committed. And I want to hear more about what we're doing, sir, to stop the inflow. I know that when Senator Cummings was the minister in charge of port, chairman in charge of the port, she was instrumental in having the scanners brought back into order, and there appeared to be successes in stopping the flow. And there have been statements made about the sources of the firearms, and various persons have pointed towards the north. Sir, all or most of the firearms that carry markings can be traced. So I have every confidence that whether it is spoken in public or not, that tracing is going on. And not only those who are caught here, but those who are caught in other places will be punished. Because in most places in the world, export and import of firearms requires licensing. Now, I don't remember which senator, sir, spoke about sources and importation, but the senator, I think it was Senator Drakes, did not differentiate between legal importation and illegal importation. And I would be particularly disturbed, sir, if we banned all legal importation, because the police and the defense force and others, sir, are required, sir, and need to have access to legal importation, even only if for sporting purposes. But there needs, sir, to be more analysis of the consumption, sir, of ammunition. And I repeat, sir, guns of all types without ammunition are hammers. You can't use them. Hammers.
Hammers.
you can't use them for anything else. So maybe, sir, the government needs to focus more on chasing, in addition to chasing the guns, to chase the ammunition. But leaching, sir, it's easier to leach ammunition than to leach guns. Now, leaching is where you have a source of something. Well, you might have a big water tank at your house filled with water and there's a little leak and it slowly exits and one day you come and find it empty. And then you say, but my driveway isn't wet, but it's just been slowly evaporating. And that's what happens, sir, with leaching. But sir, all of the legally imported firearms and ammunition should be and are traceable. And the biggest importer, I believe, of ammunition in this country, sir, are the sporting organizations. But the law requires that all of these sporting organizations keep meticulous records of who it's sold to and when it is sold to, and their declarations about what you have done with it. I do not know if the information is analyzed when it's handed in monthly, but the data is there. Sir, if illegal ammunition is coming in, then there needs to be training of the persons who search for it. You could get caught up searching for guns and looking for guns, but what you need to look for, sir, is the ammunition. And maybe there needs to be more manpower assigned to searching for ammunition. Sir, some time ago, I spoke about the work that the Barbados Police Service has been doing in reducing the number of legal and illegal guns on the island. And they've been doing destruction of firearms, and it is monitored very closely and is monitored by international agencies. Now, the Barbados Police Service can't work alone, but the citizens of the country have to provide information, sir, when they believe certain things are happening. I'm not suggesting that you go on brass tacks and call your name and say what you've seen. And I'm sure that there are channels through which certain information can be passed to the police to deal with some of the problems that are happening, sir. Now, my last point, sir, is about something that leaves me frustrated. I do not remember how many firearms amnesties they've had. And there is the belief out there that persons who hold illegal firearms will not surrender them if there's an amnesty. And that is probably true. And it probably is because if you hold an illegal firearm and you surrender it, and you have to document who you are, if that firearm is then shown to have been used in a crime, you might have to answer some questions about it. But if you have an amnesty only for ammunition, sir, any live ammunition turned in could not have been used in a crime. So you could ask people to turn in the ammunition. The owners of the ammunition might not turn it in, but the occupants of the house might. And every round of ammunition that you get is potentially a life saved. So I would like to encourage the government, with all the pleadings, to contemplate having an ammunition amnesty. It doesn't need law supervision. It doesn't need declarations. It just needs a safe place to deposit it where people can't access it, sir. Now, sir, last but not least, there continues to be a lot of hype on social media, I'm told, with persons displaying their possessions. I think they should continue to do it, because if they continue to do it, sir, we know who they are. So I'm not going to discourage people from doing it. I think everyone who owns something should probably display it on social media. But the authorities that are charged with dealing with such issues have to have all the resources and the leeway, sir, to deal with the issues, legally deal with the issues. I don't want to stand here and encourage any illegal activity on the Part of Law Enforcement. But they need to have all the resources, sir, intelligence, sir, and all the equipment and resources they need for their own safety, sir. Sir, it would be a pity if this little rock that we have, this beautiful little rock, becomes like some other places in the world. Sir, in my younger days, I lived in a country not too far from here, and I was horrified that every window and door in the house that I live in had a wrought iron. I'm a little bit claustrophobic. And yeah, and I often fear that if there was ever a fire in the house and you got a bit disoriented, or you couldn't get to the room that had the locks on the burglar bars, you can get it open, what would happen to you? So I had a habit of getting up several times and checking that all the stoves are off and the iron was unplugged. And I would hate to see Barbados come to that, sir, where your dog can't come in your house because there's a big grill on the door. And we all have to have additional expense and maintenance at our houses because we fear that somebody's going to break into your house and do you harm with a firearm. I support the bill, sir, because I do not believe, sir, that what we have seen where persons who have been charged and held in prison have been released and have committed further crimes of a similar nature while they're on bail. And I think that the government is doing the right thing in that regard. I will let the legal luminaries deal with the issues, sir, in the bill. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Lynn. Her Honour, Senator Thompson.
Mr. President, when a government is faced with a serious national problem, it is the responsibility of the government to respond rapidly, to respond effectively, to respond to give assurance to citizens and those looking on, and to respond in the name of justice for all those who cannot act in and on their own behalf. Before I elaborate on this, I just want to make the point that that is what this administration is attempting to do. It is acting in the protection of the nation and society at a time when there is a challenge in relation to criminal activity that warrants, demands, and necessitates action on the part of the government. deviate merely to make the point in response to one made earlier that one does not disclose, we were called on to disclose the national security plans. If national security plans are disclosed, are put in the public domain, then there are no longer security plans, they are mocked in. So really that call was a sort of nonsense call that cannot be taken seriously because there is no national security plan. There is not even a home security plan that can be put in the public domain if it is to be treated as a security matter. I go on from there, sir. The role of the courts is to give justice to citizens, to deal with those who are aggrieved, affected, or executing activities that impact others or impact society. The role of the criminal justice system is to dispense justice. And justice then is defined as maybe the conviction or other penalization of those who have committed crimes. It may be finding closure for the victims or the families of victims rather. It may be saying to the society that our system allows and treats everybody fairly and that they are entitled to justice, whichever side of the spectrum they are on. It is giving a sense of security to all citizens who must live, work, and have recreation in the space that we define as the national space. There is therefore, sir, within the criminal justice system and within criminal law, always an inherent tension. A tension that on one hand seeks to protect the rights of the citizen and the society, and on the other considers what are the rights and freedoms of the individual when accused of a crime of any seriousness. Minor seriousness, like taking up a bag of mangoes that don't belong to them, or extreme seriousness in the case of taking of the life. The criminal law, therefore, has various functions to punish the guilty, to deter criminal activity, and in fact, sometimes the punishment for an offense is set to deter others from even contemplating, replicating, or repeating such acts. To give justice to the harmed or the aggrieved or their relatives, to rehabilitate or give opportunity, because often the justice system, in an attempt to prevent recidivism and to help young offenders, will put sentences in place or give RDs, reprimand and discharges, to give would-be or young offenders opportunities at rehabilitation, at taking a different road. It may ask for counseling or for social intervention or intervention from the social services. You may not go to a penal institution, but may go to an institution where there can be rehabilitation and counseling and other kinds of activities, or you may be asked in some way to pay society back by doing some kind of social activity or community-based activity. The intention of the criminal law is to save society from harm and from the egregious acts of nefarious persons. So the tension in the criminal law balances that. the right of an accused person, where the attorney goes into court, certainly in the days that I practiced criminal law, and has to seek bail many years ago. So I was admitted to the bar in 1987, where don't try to do the math, where the attorney goes into the court and says, my client is not known to the courts. My client is a working man. My client is a family man. My client has no passport, so cannot flee the jurisdiction. My client has a passport and is willing to surrender it. An allegation of wrongdoing is not itself a conviction. So the fact that the person is charged means that they are entitled to bail still, because they have no previous convictions and no taint or stain on their character. And so you would make all of these kinds of pleadings with the court and get bail for individuals. And I'm sure that a lot of the arguments have not changed over time, except that, as the Honourable Senator Nichols pointed out, years ago, you never got bail for serious criminal offences, and definitely not for capital offences. You knew that even when the person was on remand for 18 months, for 24 months, once they were charged with murder, they were staying put. Now, it became a travesty where after 24 months and that case was heard, the person who by this time had lost their job, the woman gone off with another man, the children don't speak to them and so on, is then acquitted. And all of that is part of the history of what happened as the court process worked itself out. But let us look, sir, at how times have changed, and therefore see the government's response to the change that we are seeing in society in the context of that change. And we can take, for example, a case that has been cited repeatedly today, the murder in Sheraton Center. I remember being in New York at the time, and my sense of utter shock. I could not believe what I was hearing. And when you broke it down, a person who was charged with murder but was on bail was shot and killed in Sheraton Center in the food court in front of old men, old ladies, little children, all kinds of people, workers, people having their lunch, people pass through going to floor to pay a bill, etc., etc. Shot and killed by another person who was also accused of murder and out on bail. And that was not singular. That repeatedly you see these persons who are charged with multiple murders getting bail and being released back into society to continue their behavior, because they keep getting charged with more and more offenses. Now let us look, sir, at how this particular, and I put that in the context of what the government is attempting to do in the case where our behaviors, value systems, and approaches to crime and criminal behavior, and even our perception of crime has changed. The government is now saying that where there are firearm offenses and where there are murder accused, that in certain contexts, sir, in certain circumstances, you have a right to bail, yes, but you will not be allowed bail. If you are already charged with killing somebody and you come before the courts with another murder case where you are caught with an AK-47, you will have people now posing on social media with automatic weapons. So if you get caught with one of those, or you commit a crime with one of those, do not expect to walk about and terrorize people. Government has to take some measures to deal with what we are seeing in the society and to deal with it firmly and effectively so that people who are known hitmen or alleged to be hitmen, and people in society are able to identify them. People who are known to be drug dealers and the leaders of gangs, people who are repeat and violent and unrepentant offenders, people who have committed multiple murders or are at least are multiple murder accused, people who terrorize communities cannot expect to continue behaving in that way without being brought to heel and put behind bars while their cases are pending. It is a protective mechanism that government is putting in place, and we can talk about procedure, we can talk about amendments, we can try to extrapolate it and direct it to other areas of law. The reality is that government cannot duck its responsibility. It cannot abdicate its responsibility to the citizen for fear that somebody might bring this on appeal, for fear that it may be struck down, for fear that we are using incorrect process, for fear that it might affect some other legislation. Something has to be done to address criminal activity in this country in the most serious way, and that is what the government is attempting to do. Where public order and public safety are threatened, that's what the legislation says. Where the act or offense will induce shock or outrage. And it is amazing to me that a former Attorney General who was neutered when it came to performance of his job, under whom we saw the campus trends and the Kadooment Day murders, is now having a lot to say about how to solve crime when he was completely neutered in terms of his own performance as an Attorney General. But this government is saying that bail has to be refused where you have multiple criminal charges pending, that where you are using firearms and so on, that and where there are murders, something has to be done, and we believe that this is it. Sir, there are ways in which I believe this particular legislation will affect in a positive way what is happening at the level of the society. I think first of all that it will strengthen the hands of the Barbados Police Service, many of whom work trying to bring these criminals to justice. It gives them a greater sense of security that these criminals are taken off of the street, that they don't have to face them every day. It gives the police a greater sense of security, that the government is serious about protecting them in doing their job. Can you imagine what it is like as a police officer to investigate a person for weeks or months, to investigate a murder, putting your own life at risk for the society, have the person before the courts, and then they are given bail, and you have to walk around and try to solve other murders, face them on the streets? It gives security to the police in doing their job. It gives security to them and strengthens their hand in protecting the society. It gives a sense of greater security to the families of those who have been gunned down or stabbed up or chopped up. You cannot feel good as a Barbadian, as a human being, if you are walking the streets in your community and the person who murdered your relative or your loved one, your father, your friend, your lover, you know they murdered them. It's not out on bail walking out and passing you and say, morning, love. Because there are people who have that kind of attitude. It gives a sense of security and safety to witnesses. We wonder why it is people do not come forward to give evidence to the police. But if somebody commits a murder and I am a witness, and they are going to come out on bail and be standing up and watching me, and they don't have to say a word. They only have to stand up and fold their hands and cock their head on the side, because their message is, but I hear, and you know the body that you give them a witness about dead already, so unless you want to join them. It sends a message. It creates fear. When these criminals are walking around the society and the communities, the people who live in those communities, who are aware of who they are, what they do, and that they do it with impunity, are not going to come forward unless they feel they have some measure of protection. Unless they feel we are serious about removing the criminals off the street and out of the society. This legislation will help to give that level of security to families, to potential witnesses, and to witnesses in matters. It protects the wider society. And let me locate what the government is doing here today in the context of wider policy initiatives. The government is in the process of moving the Barbados Police Service from 1,250 officers to 1,500, which they consider to be the ideal number. The last recruitment had in a larger number of officers than previously. I think it was increased by 60 or to 60 or something. I don't have the exact number. But the idea is that we will increase the recruitment of people as police officers until you get up to the ideal component. We have increased the equipment and improved the equipment with which police officers worked. Improved vehicles. It was not so long ago when you called the police station when they were telling things, we ain't got in the car, can't get there. Or, well, we will come tomorrow because Sergeant Smith out with the car, he coming back tomorrow morning. Nonsense like that. So something as basic as giving the police proper police stations to operate from, vehicles that they can do their work, computers and tablets and other electronic equipment that they can do their work. We recognize that policing isn't just the presence of a body or of an officer, but that they need technology. We've improved camera access across the country. And very often now you see that cameras are used, or you hear that cameras were used to capture particular images of criminal activity taking part at a particular place. In fact, on social media, you see cameras picking up persons attempting to break into houses. We saw a shooting on social media where one person attempted to run while another was shot and so on. All of this picked up by cameras, and the number of cameras available to the police has been increased by this administration. And the technology available to the police has been increased. We have also improved their terms and conditions to give them more comfort and their families more comfort, and to incentivize them in doing their jobs, because the police have complained for a long time that they are not well remunerated in the context of what they do for a living. We have increased the number of judges hearing criminal cases from 2 to 8. Quadrupled the number in a 6-year period. We have accelerated, therefore, the hearing of the backlog of cases of criminal cases. We have increased the hearing of the number of criminal cases in the system. We have put in place mentorship and youth programs. There is a new youth program to try to keep some of our young men and young women on track and out of criminal activity, out of the hands of the gangs. Another important initiative which this government undertook was to ensure that people continue to get education by paying for access to the University of the West Indies by all of those people who were being cut off by the previous administration. And we know that education, access to jobs, creates opportunity, creates income, creates upward social mobility, and reduces the impact of crime. We have ensured that there are scanners at both the airport and the seaport to reduce the number of guns coming in through the ports. But let us be real. Barbados is an island with a coastline that is fairly large when you think of its size. And you can land guns at any point on any dark beach when there is no full moon, and it will be difficult to catch you. So while we have strengthened the scanning capacity and the screening capacity in the airport and the seaport, it is possible that guns are still coming in, being landed at various points on the coast rather than through the legitimate ports. As we explore this issue of crime, however, and I think that when we talk about crime, when we talk about what the government is doing, that this is not and cannot and should not be seen as a sort of knee-jerk reaction when I have laid out the kinds of initiatives systematically with social interventions, interventions in the justice system, interventions in the educational system, interventions with youth, interventions in our social fabric, that shows that the government has taken a multidisciplinary and multi-pronged approach to addressing crime at every level. There is also the peace program. People criticize it, but the reality is that its main thrust is to go into communities, identify where there are challenges, identify those persons who have been engaging in or engaged in criminal activity, and try to take them out of that kind of lifestyle, and that has to be commended. The government has announced that if churches are willing to have community-based programs for young people, that removes them off the streets, that takes them out of the hands of drugs or gang dealers or gangs, that it is willing to support those programs. And in fact, some churches have already benefited from financial support from the government to execute social-based programs for youth, for young people, intended to give them alternative lifestyles, intended to give them skills and training that can allow them to learn, to earn, to feel proud of themselves for having a skill that they can show off and earn from. But the reality is, sir, that people have come out of COVID with a lot of anger. And there are now a lot of people suffering with mental health issues. There are a lot of people who are on edge and angry all the time, and the slightest thing seems to set them off. All over the world, we are seeing spikes in domestic violence, and all over the world, we are seeing spikes in crime. Now, a spike does not necessarily portend a trend. And what the government is attempting to do is to intervene before what is a clear spike becomes a trend. So you put measures in place that are preemptory, that deal with what is happening, but are also preemptory in terms of trying to contain and limit the problem. I wish to congratulate our police for the work that they have done. Last year, crime was down significantly, particularly serious crimes, and I would wish to commend them for the effort that it had to have taken to get there. But we need to recognize that this is a problem from which the entire Caribbean society is suffering at this time. One country, and I'm not going to name them, has already had 1,400 murders for the year. A second country, with quarter of the Barbados population, sir, quarter of the Barbados population, has had 30 plus murders for the year. And a third country, with 2/3 of the Barbados population, has had 75 murders for the year. So that you can see that all over the Caribbean, the incidents of crime related to drug activity, related to gang activity, and related to gun violence is becoming a serious problem. But Barbados is still comparatively on the lower end of of the spike that we are witnessing throughout the Caribbean. And this government is being proactive in taking measures, some of which I have outlined, that address this problem and seek to address it effectively. And I think we have to send a strong signal to criminals that they do not and cannot rule the day, and that we will not have them terrorizing a society, walking around, committing crimes, and then getting bail and coming out just to commit more. We are not going to have it. And that is the signal that the government, by this legislation, is sending. Sir, I want, in the 5 minutes remaining to me, though, to make... Sir, I have been monitoring the clock. I wish in the 5 minutes remaining to me, sir, to make the point that I do think, however, that there are wider measures which we need to do. I would like to see, as been talked about, a national mentorship program started so that every young person from maybe 13 years old can be put into a formal mentorship program with somebody else, almost like a Big Brother program, so that you can help to guide young people and to nurture the young people. I try, sir, and I mentor quite a few young people, and it is amazing some of the challenges they have in their homes, in their societies, coming out of school. It is their self-perception, their fears and concerns about the future, and their not understanding the choices that are available to them in a world that has so many more choices for them than we would have had as young people 20 or so years ago. I believe that we need to have a community-based program that encourages communities where we know that there are tensions and rival gangs sit down as stakeholders with various counselors, various people with training, and talk through some of the challenges and try to come to solutions. South Africa did something like it with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I still believe that there is enough goodwill in Barbados amongst a majority of people that we can effect a program of that sort. I'd like to see conflict resolution skills taught to young people, particularly to young men. Because a lot of what we have is young men seeking validation, young men seeking attention, young men seeking love. And when you speak to a lot of them, they tell you that they were never respected in their homes, that they were never loved in their homes, that their mother or grandmother didn't treat them well, that their mother was missing or their grandmother was missing. They didn't have anybody who taught them where, when, how. People were not sending them to Sunday school to get inculcate values. And people were not teaching them in the homes about the value of themselves, the value of life, the value of love and care. And therefore they got into negative social behavior because the first time they felt as if they belonged, the first time they felt a sense of connection and caring was on the streets. When they were liming, when they were bonding with other young men, some with the same problems as they had, or others who recognized that they could be easy victims, tools in their hand to get them to do things that are wrong and things that are evil and harm others. But the need to belong, to feel cared about, to feel like somebody and to feel important was so intense that even when they felt some sense of, this isn't so right, being part of something in which they were valued and in which they had a sense of respect became the primary driver for their actions. And that is a negative downward trend that we have to correct, that we have to address, that we have to redress. And it is not a matter for the government. It requires a whole of society response. Government is not abdicating its responsibility, but equally, the rest of the society cannot say government has to do something. The appropriate question for all of us at this time is how can we together put measures in place to save a society, to save a country, to pull back what is happening. Sir, I saw recently the way numerous people were prepared to vilify some school children who were a little over enthusiastic at the end of the term. But these same people are not asking and did not pause to ask. They were going to investigate the teachers. The children should be punished. They did not ask, where did the children see this behavior? Whose behavior were they modeling? They did not ask, how do adults behave on cruises at night when you have actual sexual acts taking place on cruises and being recorded and broadcast, sent around via WhatsApp and on social media? That is where the problem starts. It doesn't start with the children. When the young man at 18 picks up a gun, the problem didn't start with him. It started earlier. And if we want to address the problem, the answer isn't lock up all the criminals. The answer is to try to understand what are the appropriate social interventions to address the rot that we are seeing at the center of our society that we have to deal with. So this is one of a number of measures that government is using to address the problem that requires a multidisciplinary approach. Our young men in particular need saving. They need saving. We've seen in the past, and I don't believe we should allow what we've seen to get further out of hand. And this is why this measure before this legislation, before the chamber today is so important. There was a time when alarm was raised about gangs rearing their heads in the country. The response of the government of the day was there were no gangs. When we had campus trends and the Kadooment Day murder, the response of the day was silence. This administration is speaking about what is going on. This administration is taking action. This administration is attempting to act in defense and protection of the entire society and saying to the criminals, we are prepared to stand up for the citizens of this country. And I urge all members today, the legislation may not be perfect. At some point, it may be challenged by the courts, by somebody in the courts, but that is what the courts are there for. What we are here for is to stand on the side of the citizen The little old lady who does not come out after a certain time anymore because the man who committed murder in her community that she passed by and saw the body bleeding on the road is still walking around free. The people who were traumatized at Sheraton Center will never forget the image, will never forget the image of what they saw. The people who wake up to the news that there's been another gun crime or somebody else has been stabbed, we are here to protect them. This legislation attempts to do that by saying to the criminals, we will not have your behavior. If you do certain things, you are staying behind bars once you commit a murder, once you use a firearm. And I implore every senator, even if the process is flawed, even if the legislation is not ideal, even if this is not exactly what you wanted to see, let us join together to do something to save our society and to save our country. I'm much obliged to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Honour Senator Thompson. Before you rise to close the debate, Senator Blackman, Senator Thompson, just take the chair for a few minutes, please. Yes, please. Thank you kindly.
Senator Blackman.
Madam Deputy President, as I rise in concluding this afternoon's, or today's rather, very important debate, we've heard from all of the speakers, from the government side, from the opposition, from the independent members alike. And what remains clear to me is that this bill, notwithstanding the fact that we've brought it here in a short time, it goes to the very heart of who we are as a people. And as I started this morning, I started on the premise that when you're elected to govern, and even if you're not elected, but you're part of the ecosystem of governance, we are mandated all to ensure that we do what is right for our people. And therefore, we are here because the circumstance of the day, as we've heard from speaker after speaker, bar none, is that we are here because the circumstance of the day requires us to act in the interests of all in our country, and in particular with respect to the situation on crime and serious criminal matters, murder, firearms. And therefore, as we look to close the debate on this bill, I just want to very, very briefly, in a few moments, just touch on one or two things that was raised today. As you've rightly heard, Madam Deputy President, issues of national security. No country, no international organization, no institution that has a mandate to protect its members or its citizens goes into the minutiae of such a strategy. You give broad strokes, but you also ensure that that strategy can have life, and on that basis you don't go into any detail. And this, therefore, is in response to the query as to why we don't do that. And I also want to make it clear that as we look at the issue of what have we done on the preventative side, you've heard we've implemented the scanners in our ports, both the airport and seaport, and also measures have been taken to also include the private entries in our country. And why? In order to weed out and to reduce the numbers of illegal firearms coming into our country, this was necessary. But I also want to go on another side.
If you would pause, Senator, please, so that the President may return.
Please continue, Senator Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the preventative side, it also includes the government's commitment, which it has been doing and it continues to do and will continue to do so, ensuring that our young people have access to greater opportunities in business, opportunities for mentorship, opportunities for access to training. You can think of the National Training Initiative. As members have also spoken, we continue access to free tertiary education in our country. Because why? The devil finds work for idle hands. And therefore, we are implored to continue to create opportunities that will engage our young people's minds, their creativity, and ensuring that they can put their God-given skills to good use. You've heard of the Peace Program, and that continues to bear fruit across the country. And simply put, Mr. President, what I would want the public to take away from today's debate and discourse would be that we as a government are committed and have been committed, particularly also since coming to office in 2018, in fighting crime and fighting serious crime. And we will not, in the words of our former Minister of Health, we will not retreat, we will not surrender. And therefore, as we close today's debate, I simply want to implore all of us, every right-thinking Barbadian, every member of this chamber, government, opposition, independent senators alike, to give the bill the support. Because why? As you've heard, a gunshot knows no parties and lines. A family in mourning knows no parties and lines. And we have a moment in our history to ensure that we support this bill in the interests of our people. And therefore, long after this debate and bill is closed, we have to ensure that we now have a piece of legislation that has teeth, but equally, the job doesn't rest there. Whilst that's necessary, it isn't sufficient, as we've heard. We have to continue to ensure that on the preventative side, that we have the requisite tools to do what is necessary. So with those words, Mr. President, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for the further consideration of the bill.
The question is that you do not leave the chair and the Honourable the Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Senate is now in committee.
Madam Chair, permission to call the clauses in parts, please.
Permission granted.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 3.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 3 stand part.
question is that clauses 1 through 3 do now stand part. Will
Madam
all
Chair,
honourable senators in favour?
Part 1, clauses 1 to 3. No, let him sit down. Let him sit. That's it, is Madam Chair's correction to me. Part 1, clauses 1 to 3.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 through 3 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. All honourable senators against please say no. The ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 through 7.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 1 through 7, 4 through 7, do stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 7 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 7 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. No. The ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 8 to 12.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 8 to 12 do stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 8 through 12 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? No. The ayes have it. Chair.
Part 4, clauses 13 to 18.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 13 to 18 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 13 through 18 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. And those against, please say no. No. The ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 19 through 28.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 19 to 28 do stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 19 through 28 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? No. The ayes have it.
Schedule.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that the schedule do not be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be now the schedule to the bill. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it. Report.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Blackman.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next the ayes have it. Senator Blackman.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Bill Act 2024.
Honourable senators, in this matter, we're required to vote individually rather than by a collection of voices. I will place the question and the clerk will call your names and you will indicate your vote in an audible voice. The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Bill Act 2024.
Senator, the Honourable Miss Lisa R. Cummings.
Yes?
Senator, the Most Honourable the Honourable Jerome Walcott.
Yes.
Senator, Dr. the Honourable Chantal Monroe Knight.
Yes.
Senator, the Honourable Charles Blackman.
Yes.
Senator, Dr. Crystal Haynes.
Yes.
Senator John King.
Yes.
Senator Patricia Paris.
Yes.
Senator Andrea Boyce.
Yes.
Senator Gregory Nichols.
Yes.
Senator Reverend Morris.
Yes.
Her Honor Elizabeth Thompson.
Yes.
Senator the Honourable Lyndall Nurse.
Yes.
Senator Christopher Maynard.
Yes.
Senator Miss Monique Tate.
Abstain.
Senator Kevin Boyce.
Aye.
I didn't hear you.
Aye.
That's an aye? Aye? Okay. Aye. Senator Crystal Drix.
Abstain.
Okay. Senator Andrew Malalo.
Yes.
Senator Miss Tricia Watson.
No.
Okay. Let me see. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah. Mr. President, the result of the voting stands as follows. 15 senators voted in favor, 1 voted no, and 2 abstentions. Therefore, the bill has reached a threshold of 2/3 of majority. That is 14 required for the passage of this bill, pursuant to question, section 49 of the Constitution.
The clerk having reported that the yeses are 15, abstentions 2, noes 1, and meeting the 2/3 majority required according to our rules. I therefore declare that the bill is now so passed and so cited. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This brings us to the end of government business for today. I want, as I close, to express appreciation for all honourable members who have spoken today and to wish everyone a good bank holiday weekend, bank holiday tomorrow, and a good weekend up ahead. I beg to move the adjournment of the sitting of the Senate. Sign a day.
The question, before I put the question, let me wish everyone a happy Emancipation Day tomorrow and a happy Kadooment Day on Monday. Whatever you do and however you choose to celebrate Emancipation Day and our Kadooment, please do enjoy. Leave a little energy for when next you return to the Senate. The question is that the Honourable the Senate do now adjourn sine die. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting therefore stands adjourned. Sine die.